is the Pegasus Podcast, presented by Night Sports Now. UCF news, views, and a few hot takes. Now, here are your hosts, Bailey Go Knights Adams and Christian Charge On Simmons.
Welcome into episode 249. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at ByCA Simmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. You can also email us at Pegasus Podcast by ksn@gmail.com. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. Christian, you can't throw me off the intro, even with the Nutcracker.
I'm so mad. If you're listening, I'm mad that didn't work. If you're listening to the audio version, I always try to mess Bailey up while he does the intro. I brought out the freaking Nutcracker, and I thought for sure you would laugh, and you had no reaction at all. That's really...
I mean, I smiled.
You did, but that was it. Even the Nutcracker is shocked.
See, this is we're pulling behind the curtain for a second. Christian, before we got on the podcast, mentioned we talked about how we're not doing the Nutcracker podcast, and your dad, who came up with the idea, is upset with us.
Very upset.
And listeners have asked for it, and we were like, yeah, we're not doing it.
A shocking number of listeners, by the way, have asked for it, and I'm a little off put by that our faces aren't enough for you, that you need this
your dad has been doing some recruiting, I think. He's been putting people on some payroll and giving them offers to ask for
the funniest outcome would be it was just like a dozen of my dad's burners, like to get the word out. I will say, full disclosure, I did look into the logistics of a Nutcracker podcast, and there were a couple things that went wrong. The first is that Bailey's in Tampa and the Nutcrackers are here, so that hurt. And The second thing is I did a little bit of chatting it up with the Nutcrackers. They make a very loud noise when they talk, and it would have made the podcast difficult. So instead, here you go. Here he is.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna say hi, and that's it.
Hi.
All right.
Hello, Nutcracker. We talked about how we weren't doing it, and we're like, okay, well, we've got the Christmas background. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see Christian's Christmas decorations, my Christmas decorations. I'm in a different part of my living place. I don't know why I didn't say apartment. But yeah, no Nutcracker podcast. And then you brought the Nutcracker out anyway to try to throw me off. We were
talking about how we weren't doing the Nutcrackers as the Nutcracker was rested on my lap. We were having that conversation. So.
Yeah, you tried to get me.
I tried to get you. I thought I was going to get you this time, and I did not. So we're going to have to try something even crazier for 250 next week. Maybe set off I don't know,
fireworks in your own room.
I was going to say that's not really going to impact you if it's not in your apartment or your living place, whatever you're calling it these days. But yeah.
Yeah. So this is a festive holiday edition of the Pegasus Podcast where we talk about things need to stop happening. It's been a week of just insane news after news after news. So we're going to cover everything here, or try to cover everything. And we'll start with Scott Frost continuing to build out his staff, and we'll start, I guess, on a rough note, and then we'll get better, hopefully. Because the first one we'll talk about here, on theme with the podcast, the festive podcast right around Christmas, UCF hired Alex Grinch as their defensive coordinator, and not good. I'm not happy about it. My exact tweet when the news hit was in all caps, no. And yeah. That's
my favorite part of that was Trace Choco replied to you and just went, why, right after you tweeted that, which I enjoyed. I think he was more asking you why.
I think he was.
Man, what a hire. I'm having a tough time, guys, with this one. And I promise you, don't worry. This is a festive podcast, and the rest of the podcast will be very excited and festive because all the other things have been good. There's been a lot of really positive developments for UCF. Them hiring a defensive coordinator who was so bad, it became, if you don't follow larger college football, it became like the national news story for weeks on ends that USC would not fire him over how bad he was. And now he is UCF's defensive coordinator. I'm confused because as far as we know, there's no connection or history to Frost. There's no this isn't like a Ted Roof buddy hire. This is Frost really going, hey, I've got a great idea for DC, and it's this dude. And the issue is not just, I want to be clear because stranger things have happened in college football than a DC being bad at one stop and going somewhere else and doing well. Alex Grinch's defenses were offensively bad. Mm-hmm. And when they decided not to fire him after the 2022 season, like one of the main stories of the offseason was what was Lincoln Riley thinking? And should he be fired after a year for holding on to this guy that everyone knows should go? And Lincoln Riley stuck by him and said, I'm giving him a chance to turn things around. 2023 was even worse. And they finally fired him. And there were all these columns and news segments of What is Lincoln Riley doing? Why did he hold on to this guy everyone knew should not be DC? And now that guy is UCF's defensive coordinator. So I don't really have positive things for you. I don't know if you want to talk about it, Bailey. I know you posted some quotes in an article about Grinch. This isn't a situation where it's like he didn't get the right guys. I mean, it's like other assistant coaches were making fun of him for how poorly coached his defenses were.
Yeah, and I don't know. There's so much to get into. I can read off the quotes, and this is something I just posted after the news and said this is not what I want to read about my team's new defensive coordinator. And before I get to all that, he was at one time like a hot coaching name. Like he was a multi-time Broyles Award nominee. I don't know. I forget where he's got a long track record. The track record.
Let me just say as the lead into this. So because there was a time where he was kind of considered Oklahoma's savior because he was brought in as Oklahoma's defensive coordinator when Oklahoma was like peak of having a really bad defense. He came in from Ohio State at that point. And year one, he took them from, they had been 114th in total defense the year before. He took them to 38th points per game dropped. And at the time, you can go find articles from 2019 about Alex Grinch is the next hot coach in college football. He's the savior of Oklahoma athletics. And what happened over the next few years at Oklahoma is they just slipped back and back and back to his final year there. They dropped to 76th. Then he goes to USC, which had a bad defense. They were inheriting a bad defense, and they just stayed horrible. They finally fired him. This year, their defense was one of the better defenses in the country after they got rid of him. And it's not a good track record. It's not a good track record.
What's funny is him going to Oklahoma and having that success pretty quickly was I was seeing people, or at least there was at least one Ohio State fan who said during his time at Ohio State, which he wasn't the actual coordinator, right? He might have been a co-DC, and
he had a co-DC title.
Coach.
He was really the safeties coach. Yeah.
The Ohio State fan really did not like him and said that year's defense was the worst Ohio State defense they've seen in their lifetime.
Cool.
And then Oklahoma, he goes in and 64th in points per game allowed in 2019, 29th up in 2020, and then 60th again in 2021. Then he follows Lincoln Riley to USC. In 2022, they were 94th in points per game allowed. And then his last year at USC before he was fired, they allowed 40 or more points 4 times in a stretch of 5 games and were 120th against the run and 107th against the pass. Does any of that sound good to you?
Yeah, it does, because I want this to be 2017 again, and you can't win 52-45 without giving up 45 points. So this is just part of the evolution. I don't know how to spin this one, guys. I don't. And I'm not here to say that it's definitely going to fail because, like I said, stranger things have happened in college football. It's not the poor performance that bothers me. It's really not, because we've seen both players and coaches do badly in a situation and go somewhere else and do great. We're kind of banking on the head coach doing that for us right now. Mm-hmm. It's when you have people off the record who are assistants and coaches for other schools saying this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And you have years of that. That's when I just don't see it. And I think if you're Frost, I don't know, is it just let's build a staff of everyone who, was once a rising star and now, I mean, that we'll talk about, their new O-line coach. That's very much the vibe of the staff, is guys who were once shining stars and then, kind of fell off for various reasons. And I don't know if it's that. And the one thing I will say for Grinch is he has a very strong track record of recruiting, but he's also been a DC at Ohio State, Oklahoma, and USC, 3 places where it's historically not difficult to get high-level players. So I don't know if you can say they came there because of Alex Grinch, or they just came there because those are 3 of probably the 5 or 10 most sought-after brands in college football. So he's a name, and I'm sure he'll try to leverage that name in recruiting, and early on they might have some wins because of that. Defensive recruiting in the portal is going well right now. But it's hard to envision UCF having a defense that, is, I don't know, I keep holding teams to like 21 points a game or something like that this season or in the coming seasons with him as DC.
Yeah, and like it's an interesting point you make with kind of the Frost stuff and what we're expecting or kind of banking on him doing, and a lot of the stuff might apply here to Grinch is just maybe he's learned from all of that, all of that garbage basically with his defenses in the past. But yeah, I'll read those quotes now. This was from an article on The Athletic shortly after he got fired by USC, and it says Grinch's defense always seemed confused. The scheme appeared complicated. The fundamentals were poor. USC was bad against the run and vulnerable to explosive plays through the air during his 2-season stint. The Trojans gave up 40-plus points 9 times in Grinch's 24 games as a defensive coordinator. I will stop there. That all sounds very bad. I don't
hire
like
him.
it.
Love this guy.
Bad.
Great.
Bad. And then there's the rest where this is a Pac-12 assistant who faced USC's defense over those last 2 years. He said, they're out of their gaps. You go no huddle on them. They're always looking down at the wristbands. They don't know what they're doing. They move so much, they get washed out of their gaps. The secondary is just blowing coverages all the time. They don't know how to play a double team because they're always moving. That's not good.
Especially since, his coaching experience is in the secondary. That's also a nice little added element there too. I think this is not a good hire. UCF's doing this new fun thing over the last couple of years where they don't release contracts. Like we still haven't even gotten Frost's contract. I'm willing to bet he is being paid a significant amount of money because that's how college football works. And he has a name, and even after the names failed, the names still get money. And he's a guy who was at Wisconsin as a co-DC this year. Was he? Yeah, he was a co-DC at Wisconsin this year. Was not calling the defense, but did have that title. So I'm sure they're paying a pretty penny for him. So this has the potential to be an expensive mistake. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong. And I don't know what the argument is for me being wrong. This isn't even like a two-sided thing. Maybe he learned from his many years of failure and now knows how to coach. Is it he leans on his assistants more? I don't know, but we will see.
It's what I told you the other day where I was like, it could all work out somehow. It could work out, but it doesn't retroactively mean that the hire made sense from the start, because it's not like UCF, like we're the only ones, or UCF fans are the only ones being like, what is going on? Nationally, this became a story last week where everyone was like, UCF's hiring who? And because everybody knows this guy because of how bad he was. Yeah. And it doesn't make sense right now. It might not make sense, or will never really make sense, given the circumstances. But if it plays out well, I'll be like, glad we were wrong. But at the time, we weren't. So
I'm not quite as, because you're at the stage where you're like, even if it works, this was still stupid. Like if it works, I'll shut up. I'll say, okay, maybe he had some great pitch. I don't know. Frost saw something there. Because like I will say, the other thing national media in the past caught on and praised UCF for was, apologies, my phone buzzed, was when they hired Gus Malzahn, and what a great hire he was. And that obviously didn't work out. So I don't know. I'm sorry. The news is that Jacoby Jones is now eligible for another year if he wants it. Brandon Helwig tweeted it. I don't know if you've been following this, Bailey. I don't know if our listeners have. That was very bad podcasting when I tried to read and talk and just went,
No, it's fine. It's happened before. It'll happen again.
Diego Pavia is Vanderbilt's quarterback, and this is actually like very bad for college football, but I guess UCF will try to benefit from it here. He got a judge to rule that his JUCO year does not count against his eligibility, and that made him eligible for next season. Eligibility as a whole, every time it goes in front of a judge, the judge rules in favor of the player. So I think we are moving towards a point where there's just not going to be eligibility, which that is a problem. But Dellinger is reporting that there's this whole thing going on that I guess the NCAA board is appealing the Diego Pavia court ruling now. It's paving, and Dellinger says it's going to pave the way for the extension of the careers for hundreds of former junior college players. Brandon Helwig is pointing out that Jacoby Jones, one of his years of eligibility was at Mississippi CC, so he should have an additional year now if he would like it.
Cool.
I don't know if he'll take it at UCF, but
that
would be, I don't know. He really came on strong in the second half of last year, and him and Risk seem to really have a connection with each other. So given how UCF's quarterback recruiting is going, that connection might become important next year. So something to keep an eye on. But yeah, just to put a bow on Grinch, it's so Christmassy. I think it's a really bad idea, and I
need him to walk into his introductory press conference with just a bow on him. And then there's a bow on Grinch.
Frost and Grinch is like, there's a theme with the names
hilarious.
Of this staff.
All of this happening in December is great.
Yeah, obviously DC is important. The good news is that's like the only bad thing. Well, there is one other bad thing we have to talk about, but almost all of it has been good. But that is what it is. We're going to hope for the best. Maybe UCF just goes back to having games that they have to win 52-45, which will be fun.
Maybe.
Oh, really quickly. So sorry. If you're watching video, you may notice that I'm holding my mug very weird the whole time. I got a cup of coffee for the podcast, and my mug has a curse word on it. And I didn't process
what
that
is it?
But we were about to start recording. It's one of the worst ones. Okay. So I don't know. Here's how I can say it. It's a Ted Lasso Roy Kent mug, and it's just his face and a word he says a lot in the show, and that word might start with F. So I felt like that was too far to just have
those
it.
Who know.
Yeah.
And those who enjoy good TV know.
There's his face.
JP Gilbert does not know. Bad guy. Not really good guy, but bad opinions. All right, some good stuff that's happened. Or we'll go on to now one piece of good news, especially. Kenny Martin was retained on the defensive staff. When they announced that, it just said defensive tackles coach.
Yep.
So and that pairing with defensive run game coordinator and edge edge rushers coach Mike Dawson. So those two, I guess, are teaming up on the defensive line. But
which Mike Dawson was UCF's D-line coach when he was here with Frost in 2017, which makes me a little slightly nervous in some ways, just as far as like, is there going to be a clear delineation there, or is Mike Dawson going to, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like, that's kind of an odd spot to be in if you're Kenny Martin.
Yeah. I've seen kind of it split up that way, those responsibilities in the NFL, I feel like, but I don't recall seeing this.
It's not super unusual. I believe it does happen at the college level sometimes, where you have one guy who, like edge, outside linebackers, whatever, and then one guy focusing on the DTs. My thing is, if you're Mike Dawson, you worked for Frost and coached the entire D-line, and now you're back under Frost, and there's a guy who was already coaching the D-line who's now just going to coach some of it. So, like, do you feel like you have the authority to tell Kenny Martin, especially since you're run game coordinator? That kind of implies that you're going to have final say over his decisions too, in a way. So, I don't know. That's interesting. But Kenny Martin is... I mean, probably was the best, just straight up best coach on staff, right? Other than maybe like Herb Hand. And obviously someone that players really connect with. He's a great, great, great recruiter. It just felt like we talked about it after they hired Frost. They had to keep Kenny Martin. Like if he did not want to leave, they had to keep him. And we'll get into that. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but I don't think it's, a coincidence that UCF star D tackle announces he's staying at UCF not long after that news comes out.
Yeah, no, and it was a no-brainer. There were a couple guys that we mentioned on the previous staff that we wanted them to retain. Obviously, they weren't able to do it with Cam Martin, but getting Kenny Martin and keeping him around, I think is huge for recruiting. I think it's huge for UCF's defense. And yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to say about it, but I just think it was a no-brainer from the start, and I'm glad that's what the decision ended up being. And I'm glad he decided to stay on the new staff.
Yeah, because I'm sure he would have had plenty of offers elsewhere if he'd wanted them. And I know we talked about in the past, right? We've had a podcast since Cam Martin left, I'm sure. That was more than a week ago.
I think so.
Time is nothing to me at this point, so I don't know. But anyway, they still haven't hired.
Happening every day, so I don't.
Yeah, the December is crazy. I just love the way college football does all the things at once. It's so cool. But yeah, Cam Martin left to be Tulsa's running backs coach. I can't imagine he would have voluntarily chosen to coach running backs at Tulsa versus at UCF. So
Tulsa beats UCF again.
I'm waiting on it. There you go. Story of my entire life. I'm waiting on a hell of a running backs coach hire from UCF because man, did Cam Martin do a really good job here, and probably is someone you would have wanted to see retained.
Yeah, would have liked that.
Yep.
The last one, I think the last one that I have written down, there could have been 6 more that I missed, but I don't think so. Offensive line coach Sean Clark, which you know more about this than I do. I think when it happened, I was busy and you did a lot of research, so I just read your tweet, and it was a very good tweet. So I'll pass it over to you.
I'm a big Sean Clark guy. Have been for days now. The thing, so Sean Clark, this is the first hire they made that got me like amped, like, oh, that's a big time hire. And so Sean Clark, he's coming off being App State's head coach. He had been their head coach for a few years. He went 40-24, which is fine. It's just App State is used to a higher level of success, and App State missed a bowl this year, which is not a thing that they went 5-6 because their game against Liberty was canceled and he was fired. And he has had a long track record of almost his entire career has been as an O-line coach. He was actually App State's O-line coach. And when Drinkwitz left for, what was that, Missouri? Yeah, Missouri. He was promoted to head coach. It seemed like that was just a role he was a little less comfortable in, didn't have the same success. But I mean, all the way back to like, he was at Eastern Kentucky and was producing FCS All-Americans and sending them to the NFL. App State was always great when he was the O-line coach. I think they were top 20 in fewest sacks allowed every year that he was there. I mean, they've been really, really strong O-line basically everywhere he's been. They need that because losing Herb Hand sucked. And you kind of figured Herb Hand would not be retained, because I don't think he would. I think he was just going to go. I mean, him and Gus were buddies. That's why he came in. And that's such a key position. And that is not, and I'm curious how much you base who you hire if you're Frost on one season, because with this season here where UCF has nothing at O-line and is having to on the fly try to build one through the portal, which spoiler alert is not a possible task. You need someone who has years of experience building O-lines without always having the most resources or the best guys. So like, this is the guy you want for this season when you're going to have to build this O-line.
That's a great point. Cause like if you were to pick one coach who like really, really needs to do a great job this year and do some of his best coaching work, it's going to be the O-line coach.
Yeah.
So based on what we know about him and his track record, like Clark seems like he can be that kind of guy. I don't know if you're going to be putting together, you're not putting together an offensive line of just 5 All-Americans through the portal, but if they can piece something together enough for this year and then kind of start developing some of the guys behind the scenes. I know you got Walt Claire Flynn, who's going to be, he didn't play at all last year, right? So he's going to be a redshirt freshman, I believe.
Yes.
You got him you can develop, and there are going to be guys in the recruiting classes coming up, like he seems like a guy who will be doing some developing, which is good. And when they can do that, or if they can do that, then it's not needing to find 2 to 3 starters in the portal every cycle, which is something we got used to it a little bit under the last staff, but it was also the fact like what they kind of got, I don't want to say lucky with, because it was probably a strategy on their part, but they found some guys in the portal who had multiple years of eligibility who turned out to be good.
Yes.
But it would be nice to be able to not have to find multiple new starters every cycle, in the future. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy with that hire.
He got guys to the NFL. He got a guy drafted at Eastern Kentucky. And there's 2 things I love about that. The first one is cool. Do that here because none of these guys are good. And the second, that sounded harsh, but like, let's be real, room's not in a good spot. And the second piece of that is that not a hell of a recruiting pitch when you're trying to get a lineman into your program? Is not only we have no one, so you'll start right away, but like I have sent guys to the NFL from freaking everywhere, from programs who have no business sending anyone to the NFL. I've got no lineman there. It's pretty powerful. So
yeah, and it's we'll get more onto the offensive line in a little bit with just the portal additions they've made. So this is bad to put you on the spot or put myself on the spot, but what else? What positions do they still need? Because they're still building out the staff, and they haven't hired a running backs coach, as you mentioned.
Running backs, tight ends, special teams. Nothing for DBs announced yet. Safeties, corners, whatever they're going to do there. I'm assuming Grinch is probably going to coach safeties since he's done that pretty much everywhere else he's been.
Is there a linebackers coach?
Linebackers is another one. Those are
So
some pretty big ones. Like that's not like they're not really close to being done here.
Big ones for, like you just mentioned with the offensive line, like needing somebody to come in and do a lot with a little right now, because especially now mentioning linebackers, we can kind of get into the big portal entry of the week for UCF. That's not a new segment or anything. It's just I phrased it that way. Exree Alexander, who we were afraid of losing,
we jinxed
ended
it.
up hitting the portal, and he's now he committed to Washington.
Yep.
Really sad about it because now UCF really doesn't have any linebackers that we know much about, and he really started to look like a guy that they would have been able to build that room around, I think, for 2 more years. So yeah, that's tough. It's a rough loss, and you can't really get around that.
No, and like I said on our last podcast, I said I don't know how he hasn't entered the portal yet, and it's because that is like the prime portal target, right? It's a guy who's young and has shown that he's probably going to be a star, and whose team just went through a coaching change, and the coaches who recruit him aren't there anymore. So, and he's from the state of Washington, so it doesn't surprise me to see him head back there. It sucks. Again, it's one of the situations, no ill will towards him. Just, man, that went from you have like a really, really good building piece who might be awesome next year in the middle of your defense to suddenly, oh, wow, yeah, you probably have nothing at linebacker. So it's just adding to the stress of what the
heck
is going to be.
We're always here with linebacker.
We're gonna well, we kind of had we had a brief break when we thought Ethan Barr was good before he played, but I'm just, guys, we're gonna spend all offseason trying to drill into your guys' head that lower the bar for next year, and I'm not gonna hold a whole lot against Frost if they're pretty bad, because he's inheriting a roster that is in absolute shambles, and that is even in the portal era and with UCF's resources not really a thing that you can just like build out of in a year. So it's gonna take some time.
Yeah, no, it's tough. Yeah, there's not much there, but the news you did allude to earlier about the defensive line, John Walker is staying. Yes. Kenny Martin staying, obviously being probably a big part of that, but that's huge news. That's a huge win, I think, just to kind of keep a guy like that, your highest rated recruit, and a guy who played as a freshman in 2023 and looked really good when he played
a lot and played very well.
Tough to not have him all of 2024, but yeah, getting him back it's massive. I'm very, like, that's when you talk about who is left, like, okay, all these guys graduated, going to the NFL, whatever, a bunch of them are transferring. Which guys that, like, do you have that you can recognize as potential stars? He's one of them. One of the very few right now, but he's one of them. And that's really key for probably anchoring, that interior of the defensive line.
Yeah, it's huge. And it's so funny because when he got hurt before the season started, and it was one of those things where, remember, they were like, oh, we'll have him back at some point. It became very clear very quickly, like, no, he's not. I think we even said on the podcast, I was certain he was transferring at that point. And I didn't think he was sitting out or anything. It was just the way college football has worked these last few years. I've been conditioned that if star player he gets hurt, he tends to leave. I don't know why that's a thing, but that kind of happens everywhere. So I just assumed that's what was coming. And once the coaching staff changed, I felt even worse about them holding on to him. And here he is. He's going to stay. And it was Matt Murschel at the Orlando Sentinel interviewed him, and he talked about why. And he said he talks with Scott Frost almost every day, which I told you that, and you joked that Frost is just calling him every day and going, "You're staying, right? Like you're not hitting the portal today, are you?"
Yeah.
And he said that he remembers watching the Peach Bowl at his home with his family, which that's been one of the more interesting things. Is so many of these guys have talked about, Bailey's doing math in his head, I can tell. So many of these guys have talked about, like being younger kids and remembering that 2017 UCF team, and Frost, it appears, has really tapped into that clout pretty immediately with recruiting. So that goes away if UCF goes 3-9 and then 3-9 again or something. But for now, you can very much tap into that, and that's powerful.
It's weird to think about, because I was doing math in my head and trying to think, like, was John Walker like 12 or 13 when UCF won the Peach Bowl?
Okay, he was class of 2023, which means he was 18 in 2023.
Okay.
So that would make him like 11 for 2017.
Yeah, that's weird.
Your formative football years. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
That's
really
all these
like
guys.
that as someone who's we were in college at that time, and now this kid is now going into his third year of college, and he's like, yeah, I remember watching UCF win the Peach Bowl when I was 11 or 12.
It's like a core memory of my college experience, and for someone, it's like a distant memory they can think of fondly.
When they were a child.
when they were literally a child.
That's crazy.
Aging is fun.
He would call me Unk if I ever met him, probably.
Yeah.
Clay Pasco did that, and I'm still upset about it.
I know you bring that up regularly, how upset you were with that comment. But yeah.
That's huge news.
So what's again, I'm putting us both on the spot. So D-line right now, you've got John Walker back.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Malachi Lawrence back. You've got Nigel Lee Kelly back.
Yep.
These are all being coached by different people now because of the way it's set up. But
another one, Jamal Johnson didn't actually leave after all through the portal.
Which was that him being convinced to stay, or was that him seeing his offers and being? Like,
it's another person whose name we know.
And they did Lane R.J. Jackson, which we've talked about previously.
Yes.
At D-Tech. Yeah. So D-line's not looking bad in any way, shape, or form. That should hopefully be a thing.
I've been conditioned when you were like trying to list people who were still here. I was conditioned to still say, yeah, Ricky Barber probably has another year of eligibility because he was here for so long. But no, he's gone, which is sad.
Did he ever play JUCO? Apparently, we have to go through the roster now and find out who did that.
Well, I found that like that's what I was interested in with Brandon Helwig pointing that out. So I was like, was that him going through the whole roster and trying to find like who that would be eligible for? Because there's got to be more than just the one, right? Or maybe he's the only impactful one.
I don't know how many players are on this roster right now. Feels like it's not very many.
12. I don't know, like not a lot. So yeah, maybe he is either the only one or the only impactful one, but something to keep an eye on, I guess. Ready to talk about the portal? There's a lot.
Very, very excited to talk about the portal.
Yes. So
since we decided we were doing this today and did all our research, like 14 more guys have committed to UCF. So that's been exciting. But
yeah, I'm afraid that I might have left one off, but maybe not. We'll start with the offense, which is where a lot of this has been focused so far. You want to just start with the offensive linemen all at once?
Yes.
That'd be fun. Washington guard, I think is how you say his name, maybe?
I believe so. I read
that. That's the first time I've put that together. I put Washington guard Memelar.
How is that that was the first thing I thought of when he committed?
I don't know. Seeing it put together. I don't, because normally you'll see like Washington O lineman or Washington OL inside.
So everyone, let's be quiet for a second. Well, you guys are quiet no matter what because you're not really here. But everyone,
they're just buzzing in our ears.
Let's hear you say this full name, and however you say it is correct. Go ahead.
Me?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Guard Memelar.
Good job.
Sure.
This is like when we said Castellanos for a year, and then someone was like, it's Castellanos. And I was like, okay, well, we'll have to correct that. Rizik. We have a bad track record here.
I don't know. Anyway, then today, Ole Miss offensive lineman Preston Cushman, North Carolina offensive lineman Ja'Kiah Leftwich, and Virginia Union offensive tackle Justin Royas. So
Virginia Union, by the way, D2 school, could not find a shred of information on this guy. Like, barely sure he's real, but, you know.
He tweeted, or someone pretending to be him tweeted. So we know he's at least.
I have a real question about. Remind me of his name. I'm sorry, I didn't even write it down. Since
Justin Royas, I think.
Justin Royas. Now that I'm saying all this stuff, he's going to be like the best player in UCF history. I found his Twitter because I couldn't find stats on this guy. I went to Virginia Union's and they had a page for him, and you open it, it's just like, sorry, there's no information here. I'm like,
no
okay,
bio.
You guys are doing a great job. I don't mean to be mean to the employees of Virginia Union. I'm sure they have a lot going on.
Someone's listening to this who's like, "Oh, we love Justin. We're gonna see like what the podcast is saying about him," and then they're just, "Oh man." Now
It's me saying I don't think he's real, and I hate the Virginia Union staff. Are the two things I've opened with. If someone came for that,
We're sarcastically saying you're doing a great job.
Well, it's actually so. I don't know how things are working at the D2 level. UCF hasn't been there since I was years away from being born, but I don't know. I'm so conditioned to when UCF gets someone, I can just go to the school's profile and like have all the information I need on what they've done, and to just be confronted with a blank page really threw me for a loop. But he reported a bunch of offers over the last few days since he hit the portal, and to say UCF is his best offer is actually almost insulting to UCF. Like, I don't think best is a strong enough word to describe the difference between UCF and the other teams after him. So I'm not feeling like it's a lot, and not even a lot of FBS schools, period. So I'm not feeling overly hyped about that one, but they also have no O-lineman and need all the depth they can get. So I'm not going to be upset with adding him.
Yeah, I wasn't really anticipating him being like the first one we talked about and spending like maybe the most time on right now. But
let me say, sorry to interrupt you immediately and just talk more, but really quickly, is there a chance that Sean Clark is just a genius and spotted this guy's tape and was like, I can develop this guy. I've been at FCS. Possibly. I've been down there. I know what it's like. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. That's very possible. And his own, and this is, maybe it's just me being simple-minded, but his own tweet announcing that he was entering the portal almost kind of like sold me on him, because I was like, oh, he's played a lot of games in the D2 level. He said, left tackle, 6'5", 290. I'm like, ooh, big boy. 20-game starter, which is good, 20 starts. 35-plus pancakes. I don't know why there's plus. I don't know why. Is it 36? Is it 37? I don't know, but apparently puts dudes in the ground. And he has 2 years of eligibility and a red shirt. So if he ends up being good, if he ends up being good, this is going to be an absolute gem of a find by Sean Clark, by UCF, by whoever.
So I'll go back to being me after you said that. I don't know. I'm not generally interested in the guys who have to tell you their stats on Twitter. Like that seems like a bad a bad start already. Also, he could be just making those numbers up. The Virginia Union has he could, how do we know that what were his measurables again?
6'5", 290. We'll know very quickly if he's not.
He could get to campus. He's like 5'9". Like, we don't know. Like,
I think we don't know, but I'm sure they.
I read. I know I've told you the story. I read. There's this old book from like the early 2000s called Meat Market. It was written by Bruce Feldman, and he shadowed Ed Orgeron's LSU Ole Miss program, for a year. And it was all about college football recruiting. And obviously, it's very dated now because it was early 2000s and everything has changed so much. But one of my favorite anecdotes from that book was this running back, and it's just how much recruiting has changed. Like, this was before like Rivals didn't exist, 247 didn't exist. It was this running back who I think he had like 12 carries for 54 yards or something in a game, and he was like a 4-star. And there was a reporter there who like got to the game late, and he was like, "Oh, how'd you do tonight?" And he was like, and Feldman had been the whole game and reported this. He was like, "Oh, I did really good. I had like 11 carries, 147 yards, 2 scores." And the guy was just writing down like, okay. And then that got reported and was in like newspapers, and all these guys, all these schools were offering him. And I always love stuff like that.
Well, I, for one, believe Justin that he's 6'5", 290. And it's funny that you mentioned that book, and that was the time in our lives where both of us were reading books about Ed Orgeron.
Different Ed Orgeron
books at the same time.
Yeah. Which I'm not even like you're a big Ed Orgeron fan. I'm not even like, I don't know. That was just, I enjoy college football books and like to read them because I have problems. But just to recap, then we'll move on. What's his name again? I forgot his name.
Justin Royas.
I have now said I don't think he's real. I've attacked the staff of his school and I've called him a liar where we are through this segment. So let me just apologize and say all of that was a joke. And I'm sure that now that I've done this, he will literally be a key figure on UCF's O-line next season and maybe even the season after. So
Sean Clark's going to send him to the NFL.
He's going to be like UCF's first NFL draft pick along the O-line and forever. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah. All right. The one that we know probably more and the most about is guard Memelar from Washington. Has played a lot of games there. He was I believe he was hurt in 2023, but 2022 he played a little bit. And just over his whole time there, 2022 some games, 2024 starting, 520 snaps overall at left guard. Never allowed a sack. It's great.
That's crazy.
Like that.
Love it.
Only 2 quarterback hits allowed, only 2 penalties. Those 0 sacks were in 318 pass blocking opportunities, according to Pro Football Focus. I believe this is your starting left guard or right guard. I mean, he played left guard at Washington, but maybe it's depending on who else they land. But I believe this is one of your starters. So
yeah, and to be clear, this isn't some backup. I mean, he was a season-long starter for them this year and graded very well for most of that stretch. This is one of those ones this is my favorite portal edition so far for UCF by a lot. It's a really good get. This is a starting Big Ten left guard who did very well and is now coming to your school. And I don't fully know. I'd love to get some of the backstory on how UCF landed him, because there's no coach connection I'm aware of. He's from Idaho, I believe. So
I was just going to say, I looked it up. He's from Idaho.
Yeah, this isn't some guy coming home. I don't really know how UCF is pulling this off, but I'm not going to complain. It's a big addition, because as we talked about, the O-line is they have to build an O-line from the portal. And I'm warning you guys now. I know I texted you this earlier, Bailey. They're going to fail. This isn't a situation of they'll have to do it. They're going to fail. You cannot build a whole O-line through the portal. It's just unfortunately what they've been tasked with doing. There was a CBS Sports story I was sending you some stuff from earlier about how the NIL market has just exploded this cycle and schools are spending way more money. And it said that outside of quarterback, no position has seen a bigger spike in how much money they're commanding than offensive line. Backup offensive tackles are commanding $200,000 to $400,000. Which is about what UCF was paying KJ Jefferson last year. So with UCF's resources, it's just not possible they're going to build. Now, what they can do, which is why getting someone like guard Memelar, if that is how you say it, is so important, is just minimize the holes, put together enough of a unit that it doesn't tank the whole season, and then just recruit hard. I mean, that's all you can do for the time being.
Yeah. Just a point of clarification. These guys have signed, right?
Yes.
Okay.
All of these guys have signed. Yes.
When I thought about money, I got worried because I was like, wait, because he's a starter from Washington. I'm like, how did UCF get him to sign without somebody else, shelling out a bunch of money for him? But
which I will say that's been my biggest, my favorite change of how the portal stuff works this offseason is I love that they sign now, so we don't have to do the whole we've had guys commit to UCF through the portal and a month later they're gone. I went somewhere else. It's I'm really happy that the signing is a thing now, so that's cool.
Yeah. Another one is Ole Miss offensive lineman Preston Cushman. Not as much playing time, 64 snaps at right tackle last year. He didn't allow any pressures over 24 pass block opportunities, 27 snaps at left guard over the 2022 and 2023 seasons. A little bit of versatility there, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, you've got Paul Rubelt presumably is you're going to be your right tackle still.
Sadly.
So I don't know if this guy is going to switch positions. And we'll see what it looks like under Sean Clark. But with Herb Hand, you knew some of those guys, he loved getting guys who could play all 5 positions and then just trying to figure out where they fit. I don't know if Clark's the same way, but this is another guy who's at least played a little bit, and you need depth. You've had 3 of your starters leave, and you're in a spot where you need, was it 3 or 4? Well, 4 of them left. 3 left in the portal. Gone. Amari Kite is out of eligibility. So,
you're only bringing one starter back from last year. And we keep just sort of penciling Walt Claire Flynn in at center. We don't know anything about Walt Claire Flynn. We're hopeful. I mean, I hope that he lives up to the hype. He was really highly sought after by a lot of big-time programs when he was in high school, but we just don't know. They have 3 to 4 spots to fill. We always knew they were going to bring in more than 3 to 4 offensive linemen. I mean, this is a position group that they need to entirely build out of the portal. And I think that because if you're wondering, well, why would a player, if there's only 3 or 4 slots, why would more guys than that come? And I'd say the answer is because this is wide the hell open. I mean, any O lineman in the portal right now can look at UCF and say, I've got a good shot at if I go there, I can try to start. And someone like Preston Cushman, maybe he ends up as a starter, maybe he ends up as depth, but he's a piece that at bare minimum has a good amount of playing experience and both at guard and tackle. And that's someone that it can't hurt to bring in. Maybe we never talk about this name again, but not bad to have in the room.
Yeah. And then another one is North Carolina offensive lineman Jakaya Leftwich, who started at Georgia Tech and then was at North Carolina last year, but he played more and had more to write home about, I guess, at Georgia Tech. Over 2022 and 2023, he had 652 snaps at right tackle. He allowed 28 pressures, 3 sacks, and 361 opportunities. And then last year, he played 48 snaps at right tackle, 41 at left tackle at North Carolina. Gave up 2 sacks, 5 pressures, over 40 opportunities. Apparently transferred to North Carolina, didn't play as much, which I think that's a little bit of a concern, I think, is, it didn't work out there. So why should we believe it'll work out here? But again, bring in all the guys you can bring in at this point, because
that's the thing. I'm never going to
stick.
Neither Cushman or Leftwich are guys where I'm like, oh, hell yeah. It's just get the guys in and you'll see what you have. And I don't know, my brain is telling me on Leftwich this is not a guy we're going to be talking about this year, but also I'm trying to learn from now that we've done several off seasons of this portal and these portal podcasts that there is quite literally no indicator whatsoever on any of this stuff. It's just some of it works, some of it doesn't. And I don't get it. I mean, there will be, and it's not a UCF thing. You see it all across college football. You will see guys who were nothing at their previous school and didn't play. They go somewhere else. They end up being awesome. That one's the more rare one, but you do see that. And the other weird one is you see guys who are awesome at a school. They go to another school of like similar competition level and just do nothing. You saw it with KJ. I mean, and that's not unique to UCF. That's been everywhere. And you tell me, Bailey, because I don't follow the NFL very closely. Is that a thing in the NFL? Like, are guys who are awesome become free agents and go to another team and then suddenly just aren't good anymore? Like, does that occur?
Yeah, it happens. And
I just don't get it.
Various reasons. I don't know. Sometimes it can be an injury. Sometimes it can be a guy gets paid and then their motivation drops. I don't know.
I think part of it in college football, one of my sneaking suspicions as a scholar of the sport, is college. We don't process what a freaking small sample size this is. It's 12 games, which is not a lot. A lot of times you see great stats for a guy, and all that is he had like 2 or 3 big games, and that could just be he had a good matchup. And we extrapolate those things into a career and say, well, that means there's this, and different situation, different circumstance, different coaching, different opponents. It doesn't always work that way. So it's just, I don't want to get too high or too low on any of these guys, because the season can roll around and it's going to be November and we're having podcasts about how Leftwich is a borderline all Big 12 selection and MLR has not played yet. I mean, that's not like some crazy thing. That's just kind of the way this world goes. So we'll do the best we can to guess how the stuff is going to go. But yeah, O-line in particular, just because they're going to bring in so many guys and just plug them around, I have no idea. We're just going to have to wait and see what they do.
Yeah. 3 more to talk about on offense. Quarterback Cam Fancher from FAU. He was at Marshall before FAU. This feels like a guy, we talked about it last week, getting probably more than one quarterback this offseason because the room is so bare. A guy to get in the room. There's not enough here for me to believe let's see if he can start. If they're in a position where he's going to have to start, that's bad news.
Yes. It was probably a bad sign that Bo Pribula left campus and they immediately signed Cam Fancher. Probably figured out how that visit had gone when he was here. I know a lot of fans were like, oh my God, what are we doing when this news dropped? And he has 1 year of eligibility left. This isn't even some build him up and see what he becomes play. Guys, you can't have a room of 2 scholarship quarterbacks. You can't do that. And I doubt they're done quarterback shopping. They haven't been tied to any names these last few days, at least publicly. I'm curious now, and we'll see. I don't know, but I wonder if they wait till spring now for quarterback, because you'll have guys lose battles and maybe re-hit the portal. So maybe they wait.
Smart.
I'm kind of in that boat now because you have 3. This isn't a disaster. If you end up going into the season with these 3, it's not a nightmare. You have guys who can play. Jakari isn't good, but you know that you can. It's not like the team will not. Can't field an offense if he's out there. Dylan Risk, I don't hate the idea of trying to build with Risk just because he's young and he is limited, but he did show some flashes. I'm not necessarily sold on him being the guy or even close to being sold, but if that game against Jacksonville State rolls around and Risk is the starter, that's not a disaster to me if that happens.
Yeah. I mean, based on the available options right now, I feel like that's what I'd prefer. But we'll see what the spring brings, I think. But
because only one quarterback can start. So there can be, but I know I'm dropping crazy knowledge on you guys. So, there can be a very good quarterback out there who just doesn't win his job in spring and realizes that and goes somewhere else. And maybe that place is UCF. So I don't know. It's not like they're done at that position, but I wouldn't freak out over Cam Fancher. I feel like he's just the Xavier Williams of this cycle.
Yeah. Another one is wide receiver Rick Darius Farmer, Day Farmer, who was a guy we talked about on the podcast probably pretty briefly, but we talked about him when he was a recruit because UCF was hard after him. Was he ever committed to UCF or no? I don't know. I know he was heavily pursued by UCF. I don't remember if he was.
He was committed to UCF for months.
Okay. Yeah. Then he flipped, and then he flipped.
Was it on signing day? On signing day, he committed to UCF, and how quickly can I look this up? I think it was he committed to UCF in August, and then he flipped on signing day. And if I remember right at the time, I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast. I think those last few weeks, it was people kind of knew that was coming, but it sucked because he was a guy who seemed awesome. He was a 4-star, and it sucked to lose a 4-star right there on signing day. And that's, that was the strategy that Malzahn kind of pitched when he came into UCF that has sort of held true even, beyond him, is that the great thing about being in Orlando is, you might miss on these guys and you don't burn the bridge. You just go, best of luck to you. We'll hope to see you in the future or whatever. And then, someone like Day Farmer goes to West Virginia. I'm making up my own narrative now, but maybe he's like, wow, that's cold. This sucks. And is like, you know what? Let's come back home. I mean, you do see that type of stuff. So I don't know if there'll be anything. There's a coaching change. Yeah. West Virginia, by the way, is going through, unfortunately for them, the same thing as UCF. All their star players are ditching, which that's the other thing I want to say is I don't think anyone's doing this, but like, please don't think this is some anti-Frost thing that players are still hitting the portal. This is just what happens. Like Rich Rodriguez was considered like a really good hire for West Virginia, and obviously someone with a lot of history there, and like all their stars are ditching since he's been hired. Yeah. It's just what happens. But
I mean, I think part of it too is like you look at around the country, other programs are going to see places with coaching changes as ripe for, opportunity to attract a guy from that roster and start picking off some of the players from those rosters. So that's kind of just how
I think it's a lot easier when you're a player to turn down big money offers and stay to school when you have a relationship with the staff and your positions coach or your head coach, whoever, and you feel that loyalty to them. If you have that bond that's gone back years potentially. And when it's just some guy sitting you down and going, man, your stats were good last year. You sticking around? It's probably a little easier to be like, well, Ohio State just offered me like $3 million. So no, I'm probably not.
Yeah. But I don't know. Day Farmer getting back, like they did again, that at wide receiver, they don't have a ton. And he's a guy, he played a little bit for West Virginia as a freshman. He had, I think, 10 targets. I don't remember how many catches. Forgot all the stats, but played a little bit. And maybe a guy who can figure in things pretty quickly given the state of the room. I don't know. It depends on, I guess, if Jacoby Jones can come back, but still, I think that's a good pickup because a guy that, local guy, highly rated, I saw the field as a freshman in this conference.
Always
so
good.
I think that's good.
I think he'll work out, hopefully. I'm very quickly painting a picture in my head of 2025 UCF being an offense of Dylan Risk and Burdell Richardson and Day Farmer and all these young guys who don't necessarily win a ton of games, but then are awesome in 2026. And it's not good. That's where I'm at because there's so many problems and bad things, but yeah.
Yeah. And then the final one on offense, Maryland tight end Dylan Wade, who was one that I thought came out of nowhere today. It was not a name that I'd seen mentioned anywhere.
Yeah.
But a guy coming back home. What do you have on him?
Wow, it's like you're throwing me on SportsCenter. Well, Bailey, Dylan Wade has been, what was his name again? Sorry,
Dylan Wade.
Okay,
yeah, it's exactly like SportsCenter.
All right. Is that how you spell Dylan? Is that the normal spelling of Dylan? I feel like my brain's breaking. Is that how Dylan Risk spells his name?
Yeah, that's how Dylan Risk spells it. That's not how Dylan Gabriel spells it.
That's what I'm thinking of. Okay, yeah, that I literally have his name written down, and you just call him Dylan Wade, and I saw it and I panicked. I was like, wait, because Dylan is Dillon in my head. Whatever. Yeah, so he's an Orlando kid. He was born in Orlando. I love this podcast so much. We're losers. But yeah, he's from Orlando. He went to Jones. And it's funny, he wasn't Maryland's starting tight end this year, but he was third on the team in receiving yards. He had 29 catches for 374 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had multiple catches in 8 games. He was really good all year long. And I went and looked at his stats, and it wasn't like he really padded his numbers with one good game. He was just consistently good all year. And that's a big pickup because they lost Randy Pittman, which sucks, and they don't really have anything there. And this seems like a guy who's kind of in a similar mold. And honestly, the biggest thing for me, it transcends Dylan Wade himself. And it's that this is what you want to see. And this is the advantage that no coach can remove from UCF or that even NIL can't necessarily fully take away is just they're in this freaking recruiting hotbed. And regardless of what the rest of the state of college football is going to be, there's always going to be some guys who just want to play at home. And UCF being in a Power 4 conference has really just opened the door to high-level guys. Like this is a guy who was doing very well in the Big Ten and said, I want to be back in Orlando. And he gets to come to Orlando and still play Power 4 football. And that's valuable. Like, I don't know if I don't, like you said, you don't know the behind the scenes, but like, I doubt the UCF staff had to like really go hard on the pitch here. It was probably like, yeah, we have an opening on our offense. You can come in and start. You're going to play in front of your family. Let's do it. And it's cool to see that trend continuing because that's how UCF is going to do this under Frost. Is just get those local guys, keep some of them home, and on the second round, get a lot into. That was the strategy under Gus. Maybe Frost will play some of them, and it will work very well.
That's the thing is I think it is a good winning strategy. It just depends on, keeping some of those promises and playing these guys and giving them a shot at some points.
Multiple years of eligibility too. So he's now part of my picture for 2026. Dylan Risk, Burdell Richardson, Day Farmer.
What a beautiful picture that is.
No offensive lineman.
It might not exist, but yeah, it's great. It's great to think about. Yep. That's
We haven't seen in any capacity. No, Tavion Swint. Sorry, we're over Stacey Gage.
Tavion Swint. We're not over him. Wow, this is maybe you're the Grinch. All right, the portal additions on defense, a couple of them to talk about here. Brown defensive back Isaiah Reed, who has played 1,887 snaps at cornerback over 4 years at Brown University. Graded out really well at per Pro Football Focus. He had 5 interceptions a couple years ago.
Love the Ivy League.
Yeah, 5 interceptions. He in his career was only targeted 151 times over 1,031 coverage snaps, which feels good. I mean, that's
very
low.
good.
That's a low total. I think it's some really good coverage grades there. And he's a pretty good tackler, good against the run. Only allowed 22 yards after catch last year. I'm excited about this one. I mean, again, this is the time of the year where we see stuff like this and we're like, oh wow, that's exciting. And then he doesn't ever play or is bad.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot to like here.
I'm so over the portal stuff because, I don't like.
After we spent the last 30 minutes talking about it, I'm over it.
Well, it's I just think about Ethan Barr was a team captain and a starter at Vanderbilt and did very well against SEC teams, and then UCF almost lost him to Washington, who was coming off a national championship game appearance, and then they got him back, and it was this big, oh my god! And then I wanted to bash my head into a table every time I watched him play, and it's I don't know how to predict any of this stuff, so we'll try anyway. And the one thing I'll say for Isaiah Reed, because wow, did you hype him up? And you were sending me all his PFF stuff, and I was just like, hell yeah, rename the team after him. Big fan of this guy. Is the one caveat I'll give is the Ivy League is very bad at football. Even by FCS standards, it is a very, very light league. Are they even scholarship yet? I know they haven't been.
I have no idea.
I don't know if that changed under NIL, but for a long time, Ivy League didn't even give out scholarships to players. This is. I hope that's true.
They do the whole academic academic scholarship.
Yeah.
So football for us also.
This is low level football, but he's been excelling, and I don't necessarily think you need him to come in and do exactly that. It's just, can he be a strong piece? Can he compete at this level? Can he do well? And I'm hopeful he can. Seems like a big pickup.
Yeah, I should have said, I don't know if I said it, he's a cornerback. I might have said defensive back. That's usually generalized, but you can actually see with Pro Football Focus that he played at corner. And then
so he didn't even commit to a positions coach because UCF has not hired a corners coach as far as we know. Nice.
Yes, exactly. And then the other one was Memphis defensive back DJ Bell, 548 snaps at Memphis over the last 3 years. Has a guy that's played some, not a ton, hasn't started a ton, but has some experience, and we'll see. Again, another guy to have in the room. I think the secondary you've talked about over the last couple of weeks, assuming they don't lose any more guys to the portal. That's a part of the team that I'm feeling okay about, even though they don't have a coach right now.
Damari Henderson, Jakari Henderson, Braden Marshall, adding these guys. There's pieces there. It's not
So the Henderson twins ever actually come back officially? Is that a thing?
They tweeted more frost emojis 2 days ago.
I think so.
I'm just operating under their back. I don't know. It's going to be really funny when the announcement hits. It's they've signed with Penn State or something out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's somewhere where it's actually snowing right now.
Yeah, it's somewhere where it's very cold. But I believe the belief behind the scenes and everything is that they are very much currently part of the team. So I think we're fine there. But yeah, they've got good pieces. Like I said, they still need to add a little more, I think. But it's, the defense we're somehow, it's about to be 2025 in a week. And we're somehow still in the situation of, D-line and secondary seem fine. Linebacker, though, no clue what they're going to do. So that's cool how that's just a yearly problem.
Yeah. Man, they've hosted some linebackers, but no commits yet. We'll see.
Commits yet, which I don't get because the offer is great. I feel if you're UCF, you're we may not be able to offer you the most money, but we can offer you is there's no reality where you're not starting because there's no one else here. So just come on in, pick your locker. We got tons of them.
You're gonna have to be really bad to not start.
Do you think a coach has ever just said something like that? Do you know how awful you'd have to be to not get on the field for us?
If you're, I don't think coaches are ever that honest, but it is the truth sometimes. Especially
when I look at you, you know what I see? A linebacker who exists, and that's what we need.
Yeah, I guess, man. I don't know. That's funny. That's where we're ending up on this conversation because there's pretty much that's it so far. There's more to come, but pretty pleased so far. I guess I don't nothing gigantic, but pretty.
I think it's going fine.
Yeah, it's going fine.
The
Nothing
money has
changed.
Been so insane this cycle for NIL that I was worried how UCF was going to do, and I think they're doing okay.
Nothing has changed my view or outlook on next season that much, but we'll see.
Well, it's so funny because last offseason we did the whole UCF landing major acquisitions every other day, and they're building this Big 12 title contending roster. And they went 4-8. And I'm just kind of like, just get pieces you like. And
my expectations are so low that if they make a bowl game next year, I'm gonna be like, I'd
be thrilled if they made a bowl. I still don't think they're going to.
Probably not.
Really quickly for our listeners, we are recording this at 5:31 p.m. on December 23rd. I know that you listen to this, over the days to come. So if you're listening to this and you're like, how did they not talk about, that linebacker? It's because it didn't happen when we were recording. So I'm sure there'll be more before we talk to you next. So that's why.
Yeah. Anything else?
No.
Cool. All right. Well, normally this is when we jump into the football news, but that whole, 54 minutes of talking was the news with some actually very few tangents. The only difference between that and like the normal football news is you were paying attention this time. Yeah, exactly. I was good. Wow. Hilarious. Wow. Bring the nutcracker back. Boo. There's no game of the week because there aren't any games this week. And now tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week. You should have just picked. I think game of the week is the Magic game we're going to together the day after Christmas.
Just like UCF, the Magic don't really have any players either, but they're still winning at least.
That is true. The Magic quite literally do not have a roster anymore, and they've somehow overcome it all. Tweet of the week. Tweet of the week this week goes to Hayes Fawcett, an On3 employee who tweets a lot of recruiting news, and there's nothing wrong with this tweet whatsoever. I just want to read it. Breaking. Fresno State transfer quarterback Mikey Keene has committed to Michigan. So here's the deal, guys. Buckle up and listen up. All right, gather around the fire because I got something to say. I don't know if Mikey Keene's going to start at Michigan because it's Michigan, man. And I went and did some little research behind Michigan's paywalls to see what's going on. And the consensus is that he has a real chance to earn the starting job. They did not like the guy they have this year, but he's still around. They've got a freshman coming in the belief it'll be Mikey Keene versus the freshman, and we'll see what happens. Guys, if Mikey Keene is named the starter at Michigan, you're going to have to unfollow me. You're going to have to block me. And even then it won't be good enough because I'm going to create more burners to still come after you all. Because I remember each and every one of you who said, including SJ Tui, who said the most ridiculously stupid things about Mikey Keene while he was here and after he left. And I'm going to find each and every one of you. And I'm going to find you on Twitter. And I'm going to let you know every stat line, every moment when he's in the Big Ten playing for Michigan, when he's playing in the Ohio State game. I'm going to let you know. And we're going to talk about it. And we're going to start a dialogue, and it's going to be very fun. So I don't know if it's going to happen. And if he's not named the starter, you'll just never hear from me again. We'll pretend this never happened. But if he is named the starter, you're never going to be able to get rid of me. I'm never going to shut up about it. It's going to be 2045, and I will be here talking about remember that time that UCF started a wide receiver over Michigan quarterback Mikey Keene. It's never going to stop. So be ready.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they've got Bryce Underwood coming in. I don't know. To me, it's even less than like he has to start there. He's good enough to be in consideration at Michigan, but he wasn't good enough to play for Gus Malzahn. And
can you imagine
his garbage little offense?
Can you imagine Michigan looking for a quarterback to compete and seeing John Rice Plumlee and being like, we got to get this guy? No shot.
Yeah.
I hope you guys would have enjoyed the Cotton Bowl that UCF would have gone to in 2022 if they'd started the right quarterback, but whatever. It's okay. Gus really redeemed himself in the following seasons over how he managed quarterback to validate that decision, though. So,
yeah. Merry Christmas to Mikey Keene.
And no one else, just him.
Go Blue. Yeah. All right, we'll get out of here, I guess. That was fun.
Good pod. Good time.
Yeah.
It's always good when I end by threatening the audience. That's always like
great.
A nice.
I don't really know how to recover from that.
Yeah.
But I do want to wish everyone Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. This isn't our last podcast of 2024, so I guess the year-end reflection stuff for next week as far as how much we appreciate you. But we hope you guys all have a good Christmas, good holiday season. Enjoy your time with family, friends, whoever. It's just a good time of the year. Really appreciate it. But yeah, we'll be back next week with episode 250. Until then, you can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at by CA Simmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, everybody.